Hello, Robert Skynner here, and I want to discuss Oneness Pentecostals and Acts 22:16. This verse records Paul's account of his conversion and his meeting Ananias. Paul comes to Ananias in verse 13, and Ananias calls him Brother Saul, which is very strange. If Paul was not saved until he was baptized, as Oneness Pentecostals claim, then why was Paul called Brother Saul? The verse says, "Came to me and stood and said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that same hour I looked up at him." So that's the first point. Ananias calls him brother before his baptism. Secondly, Acts 22:16 says this in the New King James Version, "And now, why are you waiting? Arise and be baptized, and wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord." So Oneness Pentecostals reason that you must wash away your sins by calling on the name of the Lord. Well, what is calling on the name of the Lord? They say that's the baptismal formula. And they understand this as a command in the sort of present tense that you want to be saved, you've got to be baptized, and you have to call on the name of the Lord. You wash away your sins by being baptized. Now, there's a problem with that. R.C.H. Lenski, in his great commentary on the book of Acts, the interpretation of the Acts of the Apostle on page 909, points out that the word for wash away is apoluo, and apoluo is an aorist participle. Now, a participle is a verb that's being used as a noun, and aorist in the Greek refers to completed action. It's usually translated as a past tense. So the correct reading of Acts 22:16 is arise and be baptized, having past tense already washed away your sins. When? When he called on the name of the Lord, i.e. when he saw the risen Christ on the Damascus road, because to call on the name of the Lord simply refers to believing, not to some oneness baptismal formula. So it's a simple past tense. Arise and be baptized, having past tense washed away your sins. So why is the verse mistranslated? Well, tradition and history. The modern Bibles follow the King James Bible. The King James Bible follows the Geneva Bible, the Bishop's Bible. They borrow from Tyndale's Bible. Tyndale borrows from Wycliffe. And Wycliffe's Bible, because he didn't have access to the Greek manuscripts, was simply a translation from the Latin Vulgate. You see, in the early years of the Christian Church, a couple of decades after Constantine had come to power and died, the Church gradually became more and more corrupt. And what do you do in a corrupt church to retain power? What you've got to do is to make the ordinary lay people believe that you, the holy priest, have the power to forgive sins. Absolvo! You see? You're a priest, you can forgive sins. People don't need to go to Jesus. People need to go to you, the priest, to forgive sins. And so there are a couple of verses, Matthew 16:19, John 20:23, Acts 2:38, and Acts 22:16, which were deliberately mistranslated. Now, I'm not going to deal with all of them. I'm just going to deal with Acts 22:16. What they did when they translated the Bible from Greek into Latin, in this Latin Vulgate translation, Vulgate means vulgar, the vulgar tongue, and Latin was the language of the people in that day, they simply mistranslated the tenses deliberately. So instead of Acts 22:16, arise and be baptized, having washed away your sins, the Vulgate reads, arise and be baptized and wash away your sins, as if it's a present tense command. You know, like arise, get up, present tense, be baptized, present tense, and wash away your sins, present tense. How do you do that? Obviously by being baptized. And it was simply a scam to get the people under the authority of the priests. And these are the verses which I have mentioned. Perhaps I'll deal with those at other times. But basically they're just playing simple grammar tricks. And by the time of the Wycliffe translation, which is almost 1,000 years, 950, 1,000 years later, there was a long tradition that these verses, Acts 2:38, Matthew 16:19, John 20:23, which is a terrible translation in our English Bibles, and here Acts 22:16. It was a tradition by this time. You then go on 100 years and you had people on the translation committees who believed this sort of stuff. You know, you had people who believed that, yes, you have to go to the priest to have your sins forgiven. Some high Anglicans would believe that, and certainly Catholics. So you have people like that in the translation committees, and of course they're going to fight tooth and nail to maintain the traditions. You then go on to our own day, and you are beginning to see some of these verses challenged. John 3:5 is another verse that's mistranslated. The Greek is from above. You must be born from above. Well, if baptism is being plunged into water, I don't want to argue with the Presbyterians, but Baptists believe that you're being plunged into water. Okay, so I'm not going to argue about that, but let's just assume that's right. Baptism is being plunged down under the water. If John 3:5 says you've got to be born from above, it's got nothing to do with water baptism. When you're born from above, you're born from God. So how do you twist that verse? How do you get the laity to believe that the priest, through the sacraments of the church, can get you a ticket to heaven? Yeah. Well, you mistranslate it. Instead of born from above, born again. But if you look in the marginal notes of some modern Bibles, what's positive is that now some of these things are being challenged. I'll finish with this story. Robert Morey, Dr. Robert Morey, the biblical scholar, recounted a discussion he had with the head of the translation committee for the NIV Bible. And Robert Morey said to him, look, you know and I know that John 3:5 does not mean you must be born again. Oh yeah, the man said, of course it doesn't mean that. It means you should be born from above. And if you look in the NIV, the marginal note is or from above. And Robert Morey says, well, why don't you translate it that way? He says, well, we wanted to. But for purely advertising and public relation reasons, the Zondervan Publishing Company, which by the way is owned by HarperCollins, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch. So you see, it's all about money. Christianity hasn't changed. It's all about money and manipulating people. For purely marketing reasons, because we didn't want this Bible to be known as the anti-born-again Bible in the Bible Belt, we therefore went along with the tradition and we mistranslated John 3:5, which we know is wrong, as you must be born again. Because if we didn't do that, the Bible Belt would never accept this Bible. And that's the problem that we have today. There are traditions that have now gone on for 16, almost 1700 years. And these traditions, unfortunately, need to be challenged. So with that, I'll finish there. Thank you.